Arthur had tried money first. When that didn't work, he used a recording. By the time Dean understood what had been cut from it, Sofia had already stopped answering his calls. Dean shouldn't have been there. The invitation card in his hand still felt foreign, thick, embossed, heavier than anything that had ever belonged to his life. He turned it between his fingers as he stood in front of the glass entrance, watching his own reflection distort in the polished surface. Cheap jacket, paint under the nails he couldn't fully wash out, eyes that didn't belong to rooms like this. He exhaled once, slow, like stepping into cold water, and walked in. The hall swallowed him instantly. Light, music, voices layered like something artificial, too smooth to be real. People moved in controlled arcs, laughter measured, gestures precise. No one rushed. No one hesitated. Dean noticed that first. This world didn't stutter. Champagne, a waiter asked, already holding the tray toward him. Dean glanced at the glass, then at the man. Sure, he said, taking one, more out of reflex than desire. He didn't drink it. He drifted along the edges of the room, observing. That was what he did best. Watch, absorb, translate into something honest later. Faces, posture, micro-expressions. He could already see the painting forming in his head. Gold, but hollow. Movement, but no direction. You're not enjoying yourself. The voice cut through the noise cleanly, without effort. Dean turned. She stood too close for someone from this world, and yet not close enough to break its invisible rules. Dark dress, simple, no unnecessary details, which somehow made her stand out more than anyone else. Her eyes weren't scanning the room like the others. They were fixed on him. I didn't say that, Dean replied, lifting the glass slightly but not drinking. You didn't have to, she said. You're standing like you're waiting for the exit. A corner of his mouth twitched. And you're not. She tilted her head, studying him now with open curiosity. I stopped waiting for exits a long time ago. There was no arrogance in it. Just a statement of fact. Dean finally took a sip, more to buy a second than because he wanted it. Then why are you here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped half a pace closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like a private space in the middle of a crowded hall. Same reason as you, I think. To see how it all works. Dean let out a quiet breath through his nose. That's optimistic. And you're not? She asked. I'm here because someone gave me a pass into a world that isn't mine, he said. That's not optimism. That's curiosity. Her lips curved, not into a smile exactly, but into something warmer. Good. I hate optimism. It's usually fake. That made him actually look at her properly. Not the dress, not the posture, her. The way she held eye contact without trying to dominate. The way she didn't rush to fill silence. The way she seemed bored, but not empty. Dean, he said after a moment, extending his hand. Sofia, she replied, taking it. Her grip was firm. Real, not rehearsed. Do you belong here, Sofia? He asked, not letting go immediately. A pause. Not uncomfortable. Calculated. I'm expected to, she said. Dean nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he had already suspected. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed. It's not. A burst of laughter erupted somewhere behind them. Too loud, too sudden, like a performance hitting its cue. Sofia didn't even turn her head. Come with me, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. It is, she said calmly. But staying here is worse. She didn't wait for agreement. She simply started walking. Dean hesitated for exactly 1 second, just enough to register that he had no reason to trust her, no reason to follow. And then he did. They moved through the hall, past clusters of conversations that broke and reformed like patterns in water. Sofia navigated effortlessly, not avoiding people, but also not engaging them. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. That told Dean more than any introduction could have. Let me guess, he said quietly as they reached a quieter corridor. You're not just expected to be here. She glanced at him sideways. You're observant. It's my job. What do you do? I paint. She slowed slightly. Of course you do. Dean smirked. What's that supposed to mean? It means you look at things differently, she said. Most people here look at value. You look at meaning. He didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong, and that made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain yet. They reached a side door. Sofia pushed it open, and the noise of the hall dropped instantly, like someone had cut a wire. Cool night air replaced the artificial warmth. A terrace. Quiet. Empty. Dean stepped out, breathing in deeply. Yeah, he muttered. This is better. Sofia leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. You don't fit in there. Neither do you, he said. She didn't deny it this time. For a moment, they stood in silence. Not awkward, just real. What do you paint? She asked eventually. People, Den said. But not how they want to be seen. Sofia turned to him fully now. Show me. I don't carry my work to places like this, he replied. Why? Because people here don't want to see it. She held his gaze. I do. Something shifted. Small, but undeniable. Den studied her for a second longer than necessary, like he was trying to find the catch. There wasn't one. Or if there was, it was hidden too deep to matter right now. Then maybe, he said slowly, you're in the wrong place. Sofia's expression softened, not into sadness, but into recognition. I know. Another pause. This one heavier. Inside, the music swelled again, muffled through the walls. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Den leaned on the railing beside her, close enough to feel her presence, not close enough to assume anything. You ever think about leaving? He asked. All the time, she said. Then why don't you? She looked at him, really looked this time, like she was deciding something. Because leaving isn't just walking away, she said quietly. It's losing everything that comes with it. Den nodded once. Yeah, I get that. Their eyes held. And in that moment, something simple and dangerous formed, not attraction in the shallow sense, but recognition. Two people from different worlds, standing exactly at the edge of both, seeing each other without filters. Not bought, not performed, just real. Sofia exhaled slowly. I'm glad you came tonight. Den gave a small, almost reluctant smile. Yeah, me too. Neither of them said it out loud, but both understood the same thing. This wasn't supposed to happen. The first time Sofia stepped into Den's world, she didn't announce it. No dramatic decision, no farewell to the polished halls she was born into. She simply texted him, "Where are you?" She watched longer than she planned to. Then, almost unconsciously, she stepped closer to Denver. It feels louder here, she said. Because nothing is hidden, he replied. They ended up in his studio without it being presented as a destination. It was just the natural continuation, a door he opened without ceremony. Sofia stepped inside and stopped. The space wasn't large. It wasn't organized. Paintings leaned against walls, some unfinished, some layered over like thoughts that refused to settle. The air smelled of paint and something raw, something unfiltered. You live here? She asked. Work here, Den corrected. Living is optional. She moved slowly, like she was afraid to disturb something invisible. Her eyes scanned the paintings, not quickly, not politely, deeply. One canvas caught her attention. A portrait, but distorted. The face wasn't clear, emotions overlapping, almost clashing. This is uncomfortable, she said. Den watched her reaction carefully. That's the point. She turned to him. Who is it? Does it matter? Sofia hesitated, then shook her head. No, that was the moment he knew she wasn't like the others. Most people asked who because they needed labels. She accepted not knowing. Do you see something? He asked. She looked back at the painting, her voice quieter now. Someone trying to be what they're expected to be, and failing. Den didn't respond immediately, because she wasn't describing the painting anymore. He stepped closer, not invading her space, just narrowing the distance. And what happens when they fail? He asked. Sofia exhaled slowly. Depends on who's watching. Their eyes met. No performance. No roles. Just two people standing too close to something real to ignore it. Days passed differently after that. There was no official start to what they were doing. No conversation defining it. It just continued. Sofia began finding reasons to leave her world. Meetings she didn't attend, calls she ignored, schedules she bent without asking permission. Each time, she ended up with Denver. Not always in the same places. Sometimes they walked for hours, talking about nothing and everything. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. Silence with him wasn't something to fill. It was something to exist in. One evening, sitting on the rooftop of his building, Sofia leaned back on her hands, looking at the uneven skyline. Do you ever wish you had more? She asked. Den didn't answer immediately. He considered the question, not dismissing it, not reacting defensively. More what? He asked finally. Money. Stability. A future that doesn't depend on chance. He let out a quiet breath. No, he said. Sofia turned her head toward him, surprised. Not even a little? No, he repeated. Because then I'd start making choices based on keeping it, not on what I actually want. She studied him, trying to understand if he was being idealistic or honest. He didn't look like someone chasing an illusion. That sounds dangerous, she said. It is, he replied. But it's real. She looked away again, her expression tightening just slightly. In my world, everything is already decided, she said. That's not safety. That's control. Din's voice wasn't harsh, just direct. Sofia's fingers curled slightly against the rough surface of the rooftop. You think I don't know that? I think you do, he said. That's why you're here. That landed deeper than she expected. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She just sat there, letting the truth settle in a place she had been avoiding. Later that night, as they walked back down, Sofia stopped him near the entrance. Den, she said. He turned. There was something different in her eyes, not uncertainty, not curiosity. Decision. If this continues, she began, choosing her words carefully, it can't be public. He didn't react immediately. Because of your father, he said. Not a question. A statement. She nodded once. He won't understand. Den's jaw tightened slightly. Not in anger, in awareness. And you? He asked. Do you understand? Sofia stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between them. I'm here, aren't I? That wasn't an answer, but it was enough. For now. He studied her face, searching for hesitation. There was none, only risk. Then we don't make it public, he said finally. But we don't lie to each other. Sofia held his gaze. No lies. A simple agreement. Fragile. Dangerous. Necessary. Neither of them reached for the other right away. The space between them lingered, charged with everything they weren't saying. Then Sofia moved first, not dramatically, not impulsively. Just enough. Den didn't hesitate this time. And for a moment, the worlds they came from didn't matter. Because this was something neither of them could buy, control, or predict. And that's exactly why it was going to cost them. Arthur didn't discover things by accident. Nothing reached him unless it had already been filtered, verified, and stripped of emotion. So when the report landed on his desk, it wasn't presented as gossip or suspicion. It was structured, precise. Dates, locations, photos taken from a distance, patterns. He read it once, slowly, without interrupting himself, then placed it back on the table exactly where it had been. No visible reaction. That alone made the assistant across from him shift uncomfortably. How long? Arthur asked. His voice was calm, almost indifferent. Approximately 6 weeks, the assistant replied. Arthur nodded once. 6 weeks. That meant it wasn't a distraction. It was a variable. And him? Arthur asked, already knowing the answer would be incomplete. Den independent artist. No stable income. No known affiliations. No leverage points identified so far. Arthur's gaze lingered on one of the photographs. Sofia, mid-step, not aware she was being watched. Next to her, Den close, but not possessive. That detail mattered. Arthur leaned back slightly. No leverage points, he repeated. Not yet, the assistant clarified quickly. Arthur dismissed him with a small gesture. Leave it. When the door closed, the silence settled into something heavier, more deliberate. Arthur picked up the photo again. His daughter didn't make random choices. That was what concerned him. If this had been rebellion, it would have been loud, predictable, easy to contain. This was quiet, sustained. That meant influence. He didn't feel anger. Anger was inefficient. What he felt was calculation. A misalignment in a system he had spent decades perfecting. And misalignments were corrected. The dinner invitation was sent that same evening. Not to Den first. To Sofia. Always start with control points. Sofia read the message twice. Then a third time, slower. She knew that tone. Neutral wording. No accusation. No emotion. That was worse than confrontation. That meant he already knew. She didn't call Den immediately. She waited. Not out of doubt, out of instinct. When she finally did, her voice was steady. He wants a dinner. Den didn't need clarification. When? Tomorrow. A pause. Short. Heavy. Okay, he said. Sofia closed her eyes briefly. Den, I'll be there, he cut in. Not aggressive. Just firm. You don't have to. Yes, I do, he said. Silence stretched between them. Not empty. Just full of things neither of them wanted to say yet. He's not like other people, Sofia added quietly. Den let out a small breath. I figured. The next evening didn't feel like a meeting. It felt like a setup before anything even started. The house wasn't excessive. That was intentional. Everything about it spoke of controlled power, not loud wealth, but absolute certainty. Din noticed it immediately. Nothing here tried to impress. It expected compliance. Sofia met him at the entrance. For a second, the environment disappeared. Just them. You can still leave, she said quietly. Din looked at her. Really looked. Are you asking me to? She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. Then no, he said. They walked in together. Arthur was already seated when they entered the dining room. He didn't stand immediately. He observed first. That was his version of a greeting. Then, precisely, he rose. Sofia, he said, with a brief nod. His gaze shifted to Din, measured. Assessing. Denver, no handshake offered. Not yet. Din didn't extend one either. That was the first point of friction. Small, but noted. They sat. The first minutes passed with controlled neutrality. Food served. Polite exchanges. Surface-level questions that meant nothing. Arthur let it happen. He allowed the illusion of normality to build just enough to make what followed sharper. You're an artist, Arthur said finally, setting down his glass. Din nodded once. Yes. And that sustains you. The tone wasn't mocking. That made it worse. Din held his gaze. It does. Arthur's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly. Interesting. Sofia shifted in her seat. Barely noticeable, but both men saw it. He's talented, she said, her voice controlled but firmer than before. Arthur turned his head toward her slowly. I'm sure he is. Then back to Denver. Talent is a variable. Stability is a strategy. Din leaned back slightly, not retreating, just refusing to lean into the pressure. Depends on what you're building. Arthur allowed a small pause. Not silence, space. I build things that last, he said. That requires structure, predictability, control. His gaze flicked, just for a fraction of a second, towards Sofia. Then back. Things that cannot afford unpredictability. The word landed exactly where it was meant to. Sofia's hand tightened slightly around her fork. People aren't systems, she said. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Everything is a system if you observe it long enough. Din watched him now with full attention. Not reacting. Studying. And what happens to things that don't fit into your system? Din asked. Arthur met his eyes directly for the first time without any filter. They are removed. No emphasis. No threat. Just a fact. The room didn't change. The lighting stayed the same. The food remained untouched on Din's plate. But the dynamic shifted completely. Sofia looked between them, tension building under her calm exterior. He's not a problem to solve, she said, her voice lower now. Arthur's attention returned to her. Softer. Controlled. Sofia, he said, everything that affects you is my concern. My life is not a variable in your equation, she replied. Arthur held her gaze for a moment longer than comfortable. Then he leaned back, breaking the line of tension deliberately. We'll continue this later, he said. Not a suggestion. A decision. Dinner resumed. On the surface. But nothing returned to normal. Din understood something clearly as he sat there, surrounded by controlled luxury and quiet dominance. Arthur wasn't trying to win an argument. He was positioning pieces. And Din had just been placed on the board, not as an opponent, as something temporary. And temporary things, in Arthur's world, didn't last. The second invitation didn't come through Sofia. From this, he said, you don't have resources. You don't have leverage. You don't have a future that aligns with hers. Din's voice dropped slightly, not louder, but sharper. You don't get to decide that. Arthur looked at him for a long moment. Then, finally, a slight change, not emotion, but intention becoming clearer. I already have, he said. The words weren't aggressive. That made them heavier. Din didn't respond immediately, because for the first time, this wasn't just pressure. It was positioning before something else. You think this is about money, Din said after a moment. Arthur's expression remained neutral. Isn't it? Din shook his head. No, it's about control. A fraction of a second. That was all. But it was enough to confirm it. Arthur didn't deny it. He didn't need to. Control ensures outcomes, Arthur said. Control destroys choice, Din replied. Their eyes locked again. No raised voices. No visible anger. Just two completely incompatible worldviews colliding without compromise. Finally, Arthur leaned back slightly, ending the direct pressure. You'll understand soon enough, he said. Din didn't like that sentence. Not because it was vague, because it wasn't. It implied something already in motion. Something Din hadn't seen yet. And that was the real problem. The dinner ended without resolution. No agreement. No visible victory. But as Din stepped out into the night, one thing was clear. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a test. And he had just been measured, not by what he said, but by what he didn't have. Din noticed the shift before it ever became a conversation. It wasn't something obvious or immediate. It was small things, the kind you only register when you already know the person too well. Sofia's replies changed first. Shorter, slightly delayed, less of the natural rhythm that used to sit between her words. He didn't ask immediately. He waited. Then the message arrived. He wants to see you. Alone. Din read it once. There was no surprise. Arthur was isolating variables. When Din arrived at the office, Arthur was already there. He didn't stand. Between them, on the table, was a thin folder. I'm going to make this simple, Arthur said. Funding. Full support for your paintings. A studio. Access to exhibitions. Connections you cannot build on your own. Din didn't look at the documents. And the condition? You end your relationship with my daughter. Din pushed the folder back across the table. No. You think this is about money. It isn't. It's about control. And the problem isn't me, Arthur. It's that she is no longer fully inside your system. Din stood up and walked toward the exit. If you try to force this, make sure you understand what you're actually starting. Din knew something was wrong the moment he saw Sofia. It wasn't just her expression. It was the distance she didn't try to hide. Before, even when she was uncertain, she still moved toward him. Now she stayed exactly where she was, as if any step closer would confirm something she wasn't ready to accept. You came, she said. Her voice was steady, but not warm. Din stopped a few meters away, reading her face the way he always did, not emotionally, but structurally. Something had shifted in her internal alignment. What happened, he asked. Sofia hesitated. That hesitation alone told him more than words could. My father spoke to me, she said finally. Din didn't react outwardly, but the air between them tightened immediately. Arthur didn't act randomly. If he had reached her directly, it meant the pressure phase had escalated. They started walking without direction. Not together in comfort, together in avoidance of standing still. The city around them was the same as always, indifferent, moving, loud in the distance. But between them, everything felt muted, like sound couldn't fully cross the space anymore. What did he tell you? Din asked. Sofia didn't answer immediately. She adjusted her grip on her bag instead, a small mechanical gesture that didn't belong to her usual behavior. Then she took out her phone. I need you to see something, she said. Din stopped walking. He didn't take the phone right away. He looked at her first. Sofia, just watch it, she interrupted softly. That interruption mattered. It wasn't anger. It was preloaded certainty. Din took the phone. The recording started immediately. At first, it looked familiar enough to feel real. His voice, Arthur's voice, a structured conversation. But within seconds, Din recognized the distortion. Not obvious editing. Something more precise. Timing shifts. Reordered pauses. Selective compression of responses. A conversation rebuilt to lead toward a specific interpretation rather than truth. He watched longer than he needed to. Then he stopped the playback. This is edited, he said. Sofia didn't respond immediately. Din looked up at her. This isn't the full context. He warned me you'd say exactly that, she replied quietly. Din's expression tightened slightly. Of course he did. That landed heavier than he intended. Sofia stepped back half a step. Not dramatically, just enough to mark separation. So what am I supposed to believe? She asked. Din held her gaze. Not something constructed, he said. Sofia shook her head slightly. You were offered money. Din exhaled slowly through his nose. He could already see how the structure had formed. Arthur didn't need the truth to win. He only needed a version that was easier to accept under pressure. It wasn't like that, Din said. But it was an offer, she replied. Silence followed immediately. Not empty silence, loaded silence. Din looked at her longer now. You think that changes everything? It changes what it means, she said. That sentence created a clean fracture line between them. Meaning, not fact. Interpretation. Din took a step closer, carefully controlled. You're not seeing what's happening here. Sofia's voice stayed low. Then show me. That was the problem. She wasn't refusing him. She was asking for certainty in a space where certainty had already been contaminated. Den instinctively reached for his phone, then stopped, because he already knew what would happen. Any proof he showed would now be processed through what she had already seen. Sofia noticed the hesitation. "You don't have anything that contradicts it," she said. Den looked at her sharply. "That's not true. But you don't have something that explains it better," she added. That was closer to the real issue. A pause stretched between them. Den lowered his hand slowly. "I can explain it," he said. "But you've already accepted his version as reference." Sofia frowned slightly. "I didn't accept anything." Den shook his head once. "You did. Not fully, but enough." That shifted her expression, not anger, but uncertainty. And uncertainty was more dangerous than rejection, because it meant the structure wasn't fixed yet. "I need time," she said finally. Den didn't interrupt her, because he understood what that meant. Time wasn't neutral here. It was space for reinforcement. She turned slightly away from him, as if breaking eye contact made the situation easier to process. Den stayed still, not following, not stopping her, because in that moment he realized something clearly. Arthur hadn't just tried to separate them. He had successfully changed what trust meant between them. And once meaning shifts, facts stop being enough. Sofia walked a few steps away, then stopped, not fully leaving, but no longer standing with him either. Den watched her without moving. And for the first time, the distance between them wasn't physical. It was interpretative, and that was far harder to close. Den replayed every interaction in his head, not as memory, but as sequence, where the pressure entered, where Sofia's reaction changed, where the interpretation stopped being open and started becoming fixed. It wasn't random. It was structured. By morning, he understood one thing clearly. Explaining himself wouldn't be enough. He remembered Elias, the technician from the repair shop he had painted months ago. Elias had been part of Arthur's inner security circle until his system optimization made him redundant. He was one of the erased, a man who knew exactly where the internal servers stored the raw audio files, and, more importantly, how the system's automated security protocols ran a diagnostic reset at the same time every week. Words had already been filtered through someone else's version of him. If he tried to correct it again, he would only reinforce the confusion. So he stopped trying to defend meaning. He started looking for origin, the original recording. That required access to someone who had been inside Arthur's system and removed from it without public trace. Not an enemy in the traditional sense, something more useful than that. Someone erased, but not destroyed. Finding such a person in a city where every footprint was digitized felt like a statistical impossibility. Den spent hours in half-empty technical chats and abandoned forums, gathering crumbs of info about system glitches that were actually unceremonious firings. It was only on the second night that he found a trace of a digital signature that had abruptly vanished 6 months ago. Den found him in a place that didn't look important at first glance. A repair shop on the edge of the city, where old electronics were stacked in uneven layers and monitors flickered with unstable input streams. The space looked forgotten, but not abandoned. It looked like someone had chosen invisibility instead of disappearance. The man didn't look up immediately when Den entered. "You're not here for repairs," he said without greeting. Den stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. "No." That single answer was enough to shift attention fully. The man finally looked at him. His expression wasn't hostile. It was tired, like someone who had already calculated too many outcomes. "Arthur," he said simply. Den didn't confirm. He didn't need to. A silence formed between them, not awkward, but familiar in its structure. The kind of silence that existed between people who understood systems rather than emotions. "I need something," Den said. The man leaned back slightly in his chair. "Everyone who comes from that direction needs something." Den didn't react to the implication. "I need the original recording." That changed the room immediately. Not dramatically, but precisely. The atmosphere tightened, as if the space itself recognized risk being introduced. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied Den longer. "You understand what that means?" he asked. Den nodded once. "Yes." A pause followed. Then the man stood up slowly and walked to a locked drawer under the desk. No rush. No hesitation. Controlled movement, like he had already decided this moment might come someday. He opened it. Inside was a small encrypted device. "I kept it," he said quietly. "Not because I believed in justice. Because I believed in consequences." He placed it on the table between them. Den didn't take it immediately. "Why didn't you use it?" he asked. The man gave a faint, almost empty expression. Because people like Arthur don't lose arguments. They remove the argument itself. That sentence stayed in the air longer than expected. Den finally took the device. And now, he asked. The man shrugged slightly. Now it's no longer my problem. A pause. Then, quieter, be careful. Truth doesn't fix systems like his. It only exposes them. Den didn't respond. Because he already knew that. 2 days later, Arthur's empire held a public event. A controlled celebration of progress, influence, and continuity. Everything was structured. Timing, visuals, speeches, audience placement. Nothing was accidental. Even emotions were guided by expectation. Sofia was there. That mattered more than anything else. Den knew a direct server attack was impossible, so he targeted a vulnerability in the heart of Arthur's ritual. He arrived exactly when the weekly diagnostic security reset began. A brief 3-minute window when verification protocols refresh and momentarily go blind. He didn't head for the stage. He moved toward a climate control terminal that, by design flaw, shared the same data bus as the main screens. Using Elias's physical override key, he forced the system to treat the audio file as a critical security alert that couldn't be silenced. By the time the automated defense flagged the intrusion, Arthur's unedited voice was already filling the hall. The central projection system flickered, responding to the remote command. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the system shifted. The screen changed. At first, static. Then audio. Arthur's voice. Den's voice. The original conversation, not cut, not compressed, not rearranged. The full structure of the exchange as it actually happened. The room didn't react immediately. It didn't understand what it was hearing at first. Then recognition started spreading unevenly, like information fighting against expectation. Sofia turned toward the screen and stopped. Den didn't look at Arthur. He looked at her, because this moment was never about public exposure. It was about whether meaning could return to something that had already been rewritten. And for the first time, Arthur didn't control the version being heard, only the consequences of it. Arthur saw it in her expression. Not rejection, reconstruction. The hall around them was no longer unified. Conversations were no longer synchronized. The system had entered instability, not collapse yet, but fragmentation. And for the first time, nothing in the room was automatic anymore. The hall did not settle after the recording ended. It only changed shape. At first, everyone expected the system to restore itself, speakers to correct interpretation, security to reassert order, Arthur to re-establish control through presence alone. That expectation lasted only a few seconds longer than habit allowed. Then it broke. Not loudly. Structurally. Arthur remained at the center of the space, standing in the position that had always guaranteed dominance of attention. But attention no longer meant alignment. People looked at him, then at each other, then back again, as if trying to decide which version of reality they were allowed to keep. Sofia stood a few steps away from him, not retreating, not approaching, just outside the axis that had previously defined every decision in her life. That distance was no longer emotional. It was structural. Den stayed where he was. He didn't enter the center. He didn't need to. The system was already processing without a single governing interpretation. Arthur finally spoke again. "This does not change what you are part of," he said to Sofia. His voice was still controlled, but control no longer guaranteed reception. Sofia looked at him directly. "It already did," she said. No escalation followed. No reaction wave. Only recalibration inside the room. Arthur paused. Not emotionally. Structurally. Because the expected response did not arrive. He stepped slightly forward. "You are reacting to incomplete interpretation," he said. Sofia shook her head once. "No," she replied. "I'm reacting to everything now." That sentence did not create conflict. It removed dependence. Den finally moved forward, not toward Arthur, not toward Sofia, but into shared visibility. "You don't control meaning anymore," he said. Arthur turned to him. But nothing followed that could restore the previous structure, because there was no single structure left to restore. Around them, the hall continued to fragment. Conversations split into independent interpretations. Staff attempted coordination, but coordination required shared understanding of what was happening, and that no longer existed. Arthur saw it clearly now. Power hadn't been stolen. It had simply ceased to be the only gravity in the room. He watched her not as an authority witnessing a rebellion, but as an architect watching a cornerstone walk away from a building that could no longer hold its own weight. "This will not end here," he said quietly. Sofia nodded once. "I know," she replied. But she did not return to negotiate continuation. Din looked at her, and for the first time, there was no interference between perception and meaning. Sofia stepped toward him, crossing the final boundary that separated Arthur's world from theirs. She didn't look back at the stage or the screens. "Let's go," she said clearly. Din took her hand. It was a firm, real grip, the same one from the night they met. They walked out of the hall together, moving past the fragmented clusters of the elite who were still searching for a version of reality to hold on to. Behind them, the system Arthur had built continued to fail, but for Din and Sofia, the silence outside was finally their own. They were no longer variables. They were free.